I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing, a notification about an email from a client. It was 6:45 a.m., and I was already behind. I couldn't remember the last time I had woken up to nothing urgent. No emails, no reminders, no demands. Sophie was still asleep, thank God. The house was quiet, and for a moment, I thought I might actually get a few minutes of peace. I crawled out of bed, tiptoeing to the bathroom, hoping I could at least brush my teeth before everything started spinning out of control. But it wasn't long before Sophie woke up, calling for me from her room. "Mommy," she yelled, her voice bright and eager. I sighed and wiped my face, gearing myself up for another busy day. I opened her door to find her sitting up in her crib, her little face lighting up when she saw me. "Mommy," she exclaimed again, this time with a huge grin, her hands reaching up for me. I lifted her out of the crib and gave her a kiss. "Good morning, sweet girl." I kissed her forehead, but even as I did, I could already feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. As I made breakfast for Sophie, I found myself already thinking about everything I had to do, emails to respond to, calls to make, laundry to fold, a list of things that I wasn't going to get done. I didn't even have time for my own coffee yet. But there I was, trying to make sure Sophie was fed and happy, trying to check off items on my mental to-do list. We sat down at the kitchen table for breakfast, Sophie munching on her cereal while I stared at my phone, half listening to the chaos around me. I checked my email again, responded to a few work messages, and tried to calm the thoughts in my head. You should be doing more. You should be doing it all. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was constantly falling behind. There was always something else that needed to be done, something else that was left unfinished. I was trying to juggle work, motherhood, and everything in between, and I felt like I was failing at all of it. By the time I got Sophie dressed and ready for the day, I realized I hadn't eaten anything. I hadn't taken a single moment for myself. I didn't even remember the last time I had sat down for a meal without feeling like I was rushing to get back to something else. And then it hit me. I was carrying so much guilt. I had guilt about not doing enough for my kids, guilt about not being the perfect mom, guilt about not being present enough in my work or in my personal life, guilt about everything, and I didn't even know how to stop it. I sighed as I cleaned up the breakfast dishes, the weight of the day already starting to feel suffocating. The constant guilt was like a weight on my chest, a reminder that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't good enough. I heard Liam downstairs getting ready for school. He was already dressed, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He came into the kitchen looking at me with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft and kind. I smiled, trying to mask the exhaustion. "Yeah, I'm fine, Liam. Just tired." He looked at me like he didn't believe it, and I didn't blame him. I could feel the tiredness in my bones, the mental exhaustion of trying to be everything to everyone. But I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to ease up on myself and just let things be. Liam went off to school, and Sophie and I were left in the quiet of the morning. I decided to take a moment for myself, just a few minutes to breathe. I pulled out my notebook and started writing, trying to process the overwhelming feelings of guilt that were taking over me. I wrote, "Why do I feel like I'm never enough? I try so hard to be a good mom, to be a good partner, to do good work, but it never feels like it's enough. I'm always one step behind. I'm always running after something that's just out of my reach." I put the pen down and stared at the page for a moment. How could I keep going like this? How could I keep pushing through the guilt and the exhaustion when it felt like I was drowning? But then I thought about something. The one thing that I've learned about this guilt. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about showing up. Every day. Even when it feels like you're failing. Even when you're exhausted and overwhelmed. Showing up is enough, and I need to remind myself of that. I stood up, looked at Sophie, who was playing with her blocks on the floor, and took a deep breath. I am doing my best, and that's enough. The morning was slipping away, and I still hadn't made any progress on the mental to-do list that was growing with each passing minute. After sending Liam off to school, I was left with just Sophie and me, an entire day ahead, full of potential and possibility. But the weight of that potential only seemed to add to the pressure. Sophie, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me, was happily stacking blocks, her concentration fierce as she built a tower that wobbled with every move. I sat on the couch, watching her, trying to enjoy the moment, trying to remind myself that these little moments, these everyday fragments of time, were what mattered. Not the unfinished emails, not the laundry piling up, not the guilt that seemed to follow me around, shadowing my every step. But the guilt was there. It was always there, like a dull ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. I kept thinking about the days when I had so much more energy, when I was able to juggle everything with a smile, when I felt like I had everything under control. But now I was barely keeping it together. And every time something didn't go as planned, every time Sophie had a meltdown or I couldn't finish a task, the guilt would hit me like a ton of bricks. I watched Sophie knock down her tower, and for a split second I was reminded of how much we as moms try to build things, not just towers of blocks, but entire lives. We try to build homes, careers, relationships, routines. And when things collapse, as they often do, we feel like we've failed. I didn't want to feel like this anymore. I didn't want to be weighed down by guilt, by the constant feeling of inadequacy. So I decided to do something that felt almost impossible. I decided to be kind to myself. I wasn't going to beat myself up over not being able to do it all. I wasn't going to carry the guilt of not being perfect. It wasn't easy. In fact, it felt awkward. I didn't know how to just be okay with being imperfect. But I was tired. Tired of running in circles. Tired of trying to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. I needed to let go. I needed to be real with myself. I stood up from the couch, walked over to where Sophie was sitting on the floor, and dropped down beside her. I picked up a block and said, "Let's build it again, okay?" She smiled and nodded, her little hands reaching out to hand me a block, as if everything that had just happened, the meltdown over breakfast, the frustration, the tears, was already forgotten. And in that moment, I realized something. I was letting it go too. I was allowing myself to forget about the guilt, to embrace the mess, the chaos, the imperfection of this moment. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I just needed to show up, to be there, to love and be loved. As we sat on the floor, building our tower, I let myself relax into the moment. I smiled at Sophie, watching her giggle when the tower collapsed yet again. And for the first time in a long time, I let go of the idea that I had to do everything right. The afternoon passed in a blur of snacks, playtime, and trying to sneak in a few moments of work while Sophie entertained herself. There were still dishes to do, laundry to fold, emails to answer. But I wasn't focused on that anymore. I was focused on the here and now, the little moments, the moments where I didn't need to measure my worth. When Mark came home later in the evening, I was sitting on the couch with Sophie, both of us covered in blankets. We were watching a movie together, Sophie's tiny hand resting on my arm. Mark walked in and smiled at the scene. "Hey, you two," he said softly. "How's the world treating you today?" I smiled back, my heart lighter than it had been all day. "Better," I replied. "A lot better." Mark kissed me on the cheek and sat down beside us, wrapping his arm around both of us. And for that moment, the guilt didn't matter. The laundry didn't matter. The endless to-do list didn't matter. What mattered was that I was here. I was present. I was doing my best. And that was enough. After dinner, I took a few minutes to reflect on the day. I had let go of so many expectations. I had allowed myself to be imperfect. I had stopped worrying about the mess, about what I was supposed to be doing, and just let myself be. And in doing so, I found a little peace. I wrote in my notebook that night, "Today, I let go." I stopped trying to be perfect. I stopped trying to keep up with a version of myself that didn't exist. I was just me. And that's enough. I don't need to have it all together. I just need to show up. I'm enough. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. By the time bedtime rolled around, I was physically exhausted, but emotionally, something had shifted. The weight that had hung over me all day, the guilt, the pressure, didn't feel quite as heavy anymore. Sophie had fallen asleep easily, her little body curled up under her blanket, her bunny pressed tightly against her chest. I stood at the door, watching her sleep, and I realized how much I had needed today. Not just the quiet moments with her or the playful building blocks, but the simple act of letting go of the guilt that had been following me around for weeks. I quietly closed her door and walked into the living room. Mark was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I walked in, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You okay?" he asked. I sat down beside him, letting out a sigh. "I think I finally am," I said. "I think I finally get it." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" That it's okay to not be perfect. To not have it all together, I paused, glancing over at the messy kitchen, the laundry basket still sitting in the corner. I spent so much time today trying to be everything for everyone, trying to juggle it all. And I realized that I don't need to. I just need to show up. And that's enough. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. I think you've been showing up every day. Even on the days that feel impossible, I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes for a second. It felt strange, this sense of peace, like I was finally able to release something that had been weighing on me for so long. I know I'm not perfect, I continued, and I'm not always going to have it all together. But I'm doing my best, and maybe that's enough. Mark reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. It's more than enough. You're enough, Emma. I didn't say anything for a few moments, just letting the silence settle between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. It felt like the quiet kind of peace that comes after a storm. When I finally spoke again, I asked him, "Do you ever feel like you're just not doing enough? Like, no matter how much you try, it's never enough?" He paused, then nodded slowly. All the time. It's easy to feel like that, like you're always falling short. I looked at him, trying to understand how he managed to keep it all together, how he seemed to handle the weight of everything without buckling under it. "How do you do it?" He smiled softly, a little tired but still kind. "I don't. I just do what I can, and sometimes that's enough." I smiled back at him, a soft, tired smile that felt like I was starting to believe it. Maybe it was okay to let go of the pressure. Maybe it was okay to not always have everything figured out. As we sat there side by side, I realized that we were in this together. The mess, the chaos, the guilt, we were all trying to do our best. And maybe that was enough. Maybe showing up every day, no matter how messy it got, was enough. Before I went to bed, I wrote one last thing in my notebook. Today, I learned that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to carry the weight of guilt around with me. I just need to show up. And that's enough. And maybe, just maybe, I'll believe that more each day I put my pen down and close the notebook. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had done something right. I had shown up for myself. I had shown up for my family. And that, in itself, felt like enough.